we have earlier seen discussions on the different kinds of yoga, right? So from the very starting, we have been discussing the concept of Dhyana Yoga, and which basically includes meditation, self-control, controlling the mind, and also elevating ourselves from the level of mind and body. So these concepts are very central to Dhyana Yoga. Also, we have discussed the concept of Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga means where we are cultivating the right knowledge. So unless we have the right knowledge, unless we have basically understood the user manual for the machine, we cannot operate the machine. So we discussed in the beginning that the human body can be compared with a machine. We have a hardware and a software. But if such a sophisticated machine, we don't know how to operate. If we don't know what is the hierarchy, if we don't know that the software needs to be fully controlled by the operator, and the software needs to be having an intelligence, it needs to be having a proper operating system, it needs to have some antivirus. So if we don't know these things, then we will be ending up with trouble very frequently. So every now and then we will be having problems. So any point of time, if you find disconnection in audio, etc., please let me know by typing in the chat box. So that is about the process of Jnana Yoga. Jnana Yoga means cultivating the right knowledge, cultivating the right intelligence through which we can take the decision, through which we can practice Jnana Yoga. So unless we have Jnana, unless we have the right knowledge, right information about the user manual of this body, mind, etc., and also the external world. So how to interface with the external world, and basically how to deal with our own faculties like emotion, ego, etc. Unless we understand these functionalities, we will not be able to practice the yoga. Therefore, in the very beginning, we just discussed the functionality, like what is mind, what is body, what is the hierarchy. So that is about Jnana Yoga. And then the Jnana Yoga also involves the knowledge of the world, like the Prakriti. We also discussed the three gunas, Sattvic guna, Tamasic guna, Rajasic guna, and how it influences us. And several verses we also discussed how basically an individual or a self gets attached to the lower Prakriti and tries to enjoy the lower Prakriti through the body and mind. We also discussed the concept of the divine. What is the concept of the divine? What is the concept of the creator? What are the characteristics of the creator? What are the powers? What are the features that the Supreme Being has? Those things also be discussed. So all that is a part of Jnana Yoga, where we are trying to develop knowledge about how this world works, how we interact with the nature, how the nature deals with us, how basically we should deal with our own self, how we should deal with our own body and mind, and we should try to elevate ourselves towards Sattvic guna, not get the Rajasic and Tamasic guna. So all these things are Jnana Yoga, understanding the Jnana of the self, understanding the Jnana of the Prakriti, understanding the Jnana of the Supreme Person. So Jnana Yoga means three things: understanding our own self, our own body, mind, and why we should control it, why we should become like an observer and an operator and operate from the level of the self, trying to come to the level of the self or the Atma. And the other two parts, there is Jnana about the Prakriti. That Prakriti is temporary and it is cyclic in nature, it keeps changing, it has three gunas. Prakriti has the three gunas, Tamasic, Rajasic, Sattvic, and basically it attracts the jiva, attracts the Atma towards it. The Atma, the self, the individual tries to enjoy the varieties of offerings that is there in the Prakriti. And then there is the Supreme Being, the Supreme Person, the Supreme Power, the Supreme Energizer, the source of the life. So knowledge about him is also Jnana Yoga. So we have discussed even the nature of the Supreme Person. So all that becomes under the process of Jnana Yoga. And as I have reminded you earlier also, Jnana Yoga doesn't mean that, okay, just reading once and done. So Jnana Yoga means that contemplation. We have to have regular reading, regular contemplation, thinking about it, meditating on it, developing a desire to develop the knowledge of the higher factors. So knowing the Prakriti may be easy, knowing ourselves and knowing the self also, knowing the Atma, knowing the body, mind, understanding it, becoming the controller and boss of body and mind, trying to detach ourselves from lower Prakriti, all that is possible by our effort, by our dedication. But we also discussed the concept that if we really want to get out of this jungle of nature, where we are always trapped in cycle of birth and death, and there are so many ups and downs going on. So it's a temporary nature basically. We are always having a transitory basically life. All the things in the life are transitory. Just like a passenger train, it is always moving and moving. So many stops, people come in, people come out, things happen, but it is always moving. It is always having transitions. So that is the nature of the transition life. Sometimes we get happiness, sometimes we get distress. So the concept in Vedanta or Upanishad is that if you want to overcome this temporariness, if you want to overcome this agitation, this distress, this all the accompanying effects that this temporariness has, then we need to establish ourselves at the level of Atma, which is always peaceful, blissful, and it is always established in equanimity. So once we get there, then we are at least peaceful and joyful internally, because nature of the self is like that. But beyond that, if we want to realize the supreme power, which is the source of life for even the self, which is basically the creator, and which is said to be the source of all joy, means as per the definition in the Upanishads, in the Vedanta, the supreme being, the creator, is regarded as the source of all joy and bliss. It is that supreme person is always blissful. That source of power is always blissful and joyful internally. So anyone who associates with that power, that individual, that self also becomes blissful by nature. Therefore, understanding that supreme person, the incentive given is that if you associate with that supreme power, then you can overcome the transitioning nature of this life. You can become stable, you can become eternal, you can overcome the basically cycle of life and death. And then second is you can achieve enlightenment. So these are the two motivations given. The one that you can overcome the distress, overcome all the negative effects of this temporary life, which is always having a lot of upheavals, up and downs, etc. It may give you some temporary pleasure and happiness also, but ultimately it is always, having transition. So in fact, Krishna, at a couple of places, he defines the world that this world is dukkhalayam ashashvatam. So it may look very negative that why we should talk negatively about the world, but if we are attached to the lower nature, if we are too attached to our lower faculties, body and mind, and we are not able to elevate from there, not able to even come to the level of the self, then it is said that this world is going to be dukkhalayam ashashvatam. For us, it will be like house of distress. Dukkhalayam means house of a place where there is a lot of distress. And ashashvatam means temporary. So that is the nature of the world. He is defining it like that. So if we really want to surpass this, we want to really come to the level of eternal or lasting peace, lasting joy, not getting disturbed by this changing nature, then the process is that you try to approach self, and from there you try to also understand and try to acquire the grace of the Supreme Self, because that is the source of eternal happiness. So that is the motivation given. So the two factors are getting rid of all the negative effects of this temporary nature that is entangling us. And why it is entangling us? We have seen the answer to that also. Ittha dvesha samuthena dvandamohena bharata sarvabhutani sammoham sarge yanti parantapa. So here it was said that there are two things, ittha and dvesh. So we are always getting entangled because of ittha, the desire to gratify our lower faculty, mind and body. And second is dvesh, means hatred, negative feelings, negative attitude towards other individuals. So these two things are always binding us to the lower nature and not letting us elevate ourselves to the level of Atma and then going to the level of super self. So first thing is if we go to the, if we practice yoga, if we practice meditation, if we practice self-control, if we practice mindfulness, then in very practical terms also, without understanding a lot of theology, very practical common sense also tells us that at least we will be able to overcome the effects of this turbulence that is always affecting us from different directions. We will become peaceful, we will become much more equanimous, and we will be internally joyful. So that joy that comes from internal peace, that is compared as the highest, that is stated as the highest happiness that one can experience. That is a matter of experience. Nobody can tell it verbally. But in Gita also we have discussed these verses where it is said that if you achieve that level, if you get an experience of that level, you will not like to step down from there. You will always like to be situated there because it is so peaceful, so blissful, so full of joy and bliss. There's internal bliss. It is not really having dependency on external factors. So the nature of the self is that it is full of peace and bliss. So once we come to the level of self, whatever external influences may be, we will be able to establish ourselves in peace and equanimity. Even, we have experience of mental factors, right? So we have experience that at least definitely we can get rid of mental difficulties, all the emotional upheavals, all the distress, all the anxieties, all the stress, all the worries, all the fears, all these things will be going. Also attachment, emotional distress, those kind of things will be gone if we are able to elevate ourselves to that level. But the second part is, there are also examples where we can detach ourselves from the bodily pain as well. So there is, Mr. Manoj Sharma is saying that my volume is low. So is it better now? Is it better now? Hello, is it better
Yes,
now? Can you just type?
A little more if you can raise. It is a little better, but if you can raise a little more.
Yeah, so
yes, now it's good.
The thing is that I'm using.
No, it's good.
Yeah, so let me. This is better.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so this is the so these are the things we have discussed. That okay means coming to the level of the self. What are the benefits? And then the next level is that trying to come to the level of the super self and trying to understand his grace, or basically trying to associate with that power. So that is the powerhouse of energy. That is the powerhouse of life force. That is the powerhouse of all bliss and joy. So that is how it is defined. So now we may not be able to understand that definition right now. We may not understand why assuming that there is a supreme person and a creator and associating with that creator is so joyful and blissful. Why association with that supreme being can bring joy and bliss. So we will try to practically understand first how this can happen, how we can become more, I would say, happy if we are associated with basically, if at least we are trying to identify with the supreme force or supreme life force, supreme person or the supreme energy or the supreme creator who is basically the big boss. So again, I mean, we will try to understand logically that okay, how this process can help, how this can practically be useful in executing our other activities, like how do you become a better karma yogi by devotion? How do you become a better dhyana yogi? How do you become a better jnana yogi? So all this jnana, karma, yoga, dhyan, etc., it can be improved by the practice of bhakti. So that is what we are going to look at. So this is very central to the Gita, and it is emphasized in every chapter, every single chapter. Initial first 2-3 chapters, first, second chapter may not have direct references. Still, there are some indirect ones. But after that, every chapter has concluding verses. That okay, means it talks about everything throughout the chapter, and towards the end there is a concluding verse that okay, you have to have devotion. Without bhakti, it is not going to work. Whatever yoga you may try, it is not going to work without having the component of bhakti. So this is very clear. In every chapter, towards the end, this component is added. Therefore, it is important to understand why it is being emphasized and why it can have positive effect on our other practices. So let us try to look at the second slide. The second slide is again the summary of what I have just told you right now. So we have seen these three classifications. First is the Purusha, or the self, or the individual Atma, that are we, means we are the self, and there are infinite number of selves. And then there is the lower nature, Prakriti. So here we have the lower nature, which is Prakriti, which is basically matter, right? So we have the matter which is making the world, ether, water, air, fire. So these are basically the Panch Bhut. And then we have the subtle elements, mind, ego, intelligence, all these, emotions. These are at the mind level, mental level. They are subtle energies. So they are gross energies and they are subtle energies. And then there are other factors in the Prakriti as well. There is time factor. There is Kal. There is Karma. Karma means the activities which are sustaining life. Activities which are basically bringing change in the nature. Activities which are resulting from interaction between the Purusha and the Prakriti. So whenever Purusha is interacting with the Prakriti, whenever he is using the faculties of the Prakriti, he is causing changes. He is causing karma. Karma is happening. So that is the karma part. Guna also, we have seen the Prakriti has three gunas, Tamasic, Sattvic, Rajasic, which basically has influence on the Purusha. So all these things are basically resulting in all the different activities that we see around us. So if the Purusha gets too entangled, too attached to the Prakriti, he gets too attached to his bodily functions or the mental functions, and gets too engrossed in it, then he is not even able to come to the level of the self. He is not able to identify himself aloof from these things. He thinks that his thoughts are him. He thinks that his body is him. So he is not able to see himself as the operator or controller of the body and mind. He identifies with body and mind. That is I would say regarded as the wrong way of leading life. So what is recommended is definitely we should elevate at least and come to the level of the self. And the main reason is because Prakriti is always changing, always transitory, and if we get too entangled in the Prakriti because of our attraction towards desires, because of our attachment towards our tendencies to enjoy the Prakriti in many ways, we will always be entangled. There will be action, reaction, action, reaction. We try to enjoy something good, maybe temporarily we get something good, but there will be a reaction which will give us something bad also, and we have to be ready for that also. So there is always a balance. The bank account always gets balanced. Something positive, something negative, something positive, something negative keeps happening. And therefore, it is all very turbulent. So in Gita, we have learned this word, Gahana Karmanogati. So this karma chakra is very, very stringent. It means it binds us and it does not let us release. Likewise, this concept of Maya has been discussed. In Gita, Krishna says, Mama Maya Duratyaya, Mama Eva Prabhadyante, Mayam Etam Tarantite. Maya means material nature, the pull of the material nature, pull of the temporary nature. That is very strong. It binds us because the Purusha is finding something, he is getting some sensation. Because he is too attached to the Prakriti, he is getting some sensations of pleasure from the different factors of the Prakriti. Sometimes, he gets something sweet and he tries to enjoy it. So he is getting attached to all those, different pleasures. But at the same time, he's also getting beaten up. He is also getting beaten up by stick. So he gets catching also every now and then. So, but he remembers that, that sensory feeling, that pleasure, those sweet things that he temporarily acquired from the Prakriti. And therefore, remembering those sweet things, he is again and again getting attached to the Prakriti. And that causes bondage. That causes basically entanglement with the lower nature. He is not able to elevate himself above the Prakriti. And then, what is recommended is that we become established in the self and get detached. At least try to detach ourselves from this lower Prakriti. So then we can become situated at the level of self, which is in itself basically very peaceful. So if we are able to come to the level of self, then we are equanimous. Next level is Purushottama, or the supreme self. So this definition we have seen also in the 15th chapter. Daumo Purusho Loke Charata Akshar Evacha Charat Sarvani Bhutani Kutatso Akshar Uttate Uttama Purusha Suvanya Paramatmeti Udarita Yo Lokatrayam Avishya Vibharti Avyaya Ishwaraha. So he says that there are two kinds of individuals or selves in this world: one who are bond with the Prakriti, who are who are entangled in the Prakriti, and the second is those who are above the Prakriti, who have elevated themselves beyond the Prakriti, who have come to at least the level of the self. So they are basically situated in the level of self or Brahman. The next level is that if you really want to come to the level of Purushottama, there that is the source of eternity. So if you really want to achieve eternity and lasting peace, lasting joy, then we need to approach the Purushottama. Unless we do that, there is always a chance that we will fall down again into the Prakriti. So if we want to hook to the if we want to hook to the source of peace and joy, so it is important that we have a shelter. It is important that we are able to hook to a bigger source, which is basically sustaining and supporting us. So if we stay in ourselves, if we stay as an individual, if we stay basically as an individual self, then it is always possible that we may again go back and fall back onto the Prakriti. But if we are able to hinge upon, if we are able to basically hinge on to or latch on to the higher force, the higher power, the the Purushottama or the Parmeshwar or the Paramatma, whatever you call it, that supreme power, which is the reservoir of bliss, reservoir of peace, reservoir of all knowledge, all power. So in that case, we are having shelter. We are getting attached to a bigger reservoir, and then we are plugged into the whole source of eternal joy, eternal bliss, eternal peace, etc. That is the main concept. That means you try to attach yourself to the Purushottama or the Supreme Self, and taking shelter of the Supreme Self. In that case, our stability in that position of equanimity, it will be much more stronger. So that is the motivation over there. And then the other issue is that this Supreme Person is beyond matter. So through our mental speculations or through our natural faculties, we may not be able to understand. We may not be able to approach that Supreme Person. So there is a component of grace given, that unless we have devotion towards the Supreme Person and unless he has grace upon us, we cannot approach him. We cannot approach the reservoir of all the good qualities. So that is the concept of bhakti. That if you want to really attach yourself to the powerhouse of bliss, powerhouse of peace, powerhouse of all knowledge, then you need to have supplication. You need to have surrender. There is a concept of Sharanagati towards that Supreme Person. Then only you can acquire the grace, and by that grace alone, you can basically know him, or you can achieve him, or basically you can get associated with that Supreme Person. So that is the process of bhakti in very brief. Now let us go, this is, again, I'm going a little theological here, and maybe I'm talking more in a poetic sense. So let us try to understand this in a more practical way. So I hope I'm still audible. Hello.
Yes, you are. Yes, you are audible. Yes, yes.
Okay. So, so here we have this concept of individuality, right? So all of us are individuals. So if you look at the first diagram over here, the top left diagram, I have shown a lot of individuals. They are having conflict. They are having some disagreement. They are talking. They are discussing. They are fighting. They are arguing. So as individuals, each of us have our own body and mind. And if we are at the lowest level of the Prakriti, that means we are just attached to our own physical body and mind, then our only interest is to gratify the body and mind. That is our personal interest. So I have shown the last pair, if you see, last couple, if you see, I have drawn two red circles. So every individual is having their own circle. So they want to be within their circle. They want to basically gratify themselves, their body and mind. If the other person is contributing to that gratification, then we also try to contribute to his or her gratification. We also try to be good. However, if the other person is hurting our self-interest, if the other person is hurting our self-interest of self-gratification, then we basically become negative towards it, the other person. That is the overall picture in all scenarios, all aspects, all fields of life. That's what keeps happening. So each of us are playing at the individual level. Our own individual thoughts, emotions, ego, pleasure, bodily pleasure, comfort, all those things. So these are at the individual level. So each individual is trying to boost himself or herself up, rise up at the cost of others maybe. So that is the individual mentality. Now, when we come to the family, for example, so family is one step higher. So here we see that, okay, means we have a sense of unity. We have caring attitude towards our family member. We say that, okay, means if our family member is getting some distress or some trouble, some tension, some pain, we also feel the pain because we try to, we basically have empathy for them. We are having some affection for them. We are emotionally, mentally attached to them or physically attached to them. So we have some mental, physical attachment. If we have mental attachment, emotional attachment, then whatever pain that person is feeling, that pain also gets transferred to us in some ways. So there is definitely a bond, and then we are working for the entire family. So we are caring for the entire family. Then we are going beyond self-interest. We are not just worrying about our own body and mind, but we are worrying about the entire family. The next level, here we have seen that we are expanding our horizon. So from individuality, we are going towards a group of people, maybe a small group, but still expanded beyond our own personal interest. But still, it is our personal circle, our blood relation, our immediate circle. So still, it is a limited circle. Now, next, you can have community level work. So if you look at the third picture on the top right, that is, I'm trying to depict the community. That, okay, means there is a community of people working for a particular cause. It may be an organization, it may be a society, it may be, a group of people who are working on a cause, or it may be just locality-based community. That, okay, means there are 10 villages and, together they form a community. Or these days we have apartments, they have societies. So maybe there are 200 flats in a society and all of them form a community. So there is a sense of, community in that. So basically we try to celebrate our festivals together. Every morning you will go out and have a walk or have a jogging. You will say hello to others. So there is some bonding. There is some relationship. And if there is a problem in the community, if somebody's house is getting robbed or if there is some crime happening in the community, we feel also sensitized because we are part of the community. We are part of that society or organization or whatever. So we are also getting influenced. So we are also sharing their pain, sharing their distress, or if somebody is, getting something good and is throwing a party, we are going there, we are congratulating. So it becomes a kind of bond. So we are either working for a common cause, maybe for a good social cause. There is a bond. So in that case, for example, there are a lot of NGOs, a lot of good societies where people work without their own self-interest, just because of the cause. They like the cause. And that way they forget about their own self-interest. They forget about their own, bodily and mental gratification, but they get motivated by a higher cause. That, okay, this organization is working on a good motive. They are working on a good product or solution, or they are working on a good social cause which has good impact. So let me be a part of it, and that way I can contribute to that cause. So that way we are basically, at least for the, to some extent, we are forgetting our own limited identities. We are basically overcoming our own limited identities, and we are growing further. We are working for a bigger cause and not worrying so much. I mean, still there may be self-interest in the societies, in the communities. Also, there will be some politics. There will be people who are trying to occupy office posts or becoming bosses over there, trying to go up the promotion ladder. Those things will happen. But still, at least at a bigger picture, if you look at it, so there are a lot of people, a lot of volunteers, a lot of individuals who are motivated by the cause. If there is a good cause, a lot of people will come. So this is one next higher level. And then likewise, you may see even for temporary things, like there is an IPL match, and then there are regional groups. So there is a Kolkata Knight Rider, and then there is a Chennai, I don't know what. There is a Bombay group, and there is the Rajasthan Royals, and all this. So again, the state people, means people in Rajasthan will feel allied with the Rajasthan Royals. The people in Bengal will feel allied with Kolkata Knight Riders, and so on. So these are temporary things, temporary groups, not even Bengalis. They are foreigners coming and forming Kolkata Knight Riders. But still they are getting attached mentally. And they are recognizing that, okay, this is something associated with our region, and we are having some emotion attached to that region. We are having some pride attached to that region. And therefore, even temporary basis, we are, getting motivated. We are watching that show, and we are getting some, enthusiasm, etc. So many kinds, we are seeing that we are celebrating for a common cause, for a higher cause, actually. And then, of course, there will be the concept of nationalism. For us, the biggest geography in which we can move freely, and we have all the benefits of citizenship. We have all the freedom of, our citizenship and all the rights given by our constitution. So definitely the nation is giving us a lot of benefits. It is giving us good governance. It is giving us a good system. It is giving us a lot of rights and freedom. It is giving us a lot of public facilities. So it is giving us a platform. It is allowing us to live in a good way. It is continuously trying to at least improve our standard of living in some way. At least it is generating some opportunities that we can use. So definitely we have some emotion. Like we have heard a lot of good things about our country, that means we have a good past, and we have cultural heritage, we have so rich cultural values. So we take pride in these things. So there is a sense of nationalism. And then when there is a fight with other country and there is some soldier getting killed, so the entire country feels angry, the entire country feels hurt. If there is a cricket match and there is a victory over other country, the entire country feels proud, the entire country celebrates. So likewise, there is a sense of unity. So there also, whether if you go to a cricket stadium, whether a person is rich or poor, whether a person is a Congress supporter or BJP supporter, whether a person is South Indian or North Indian, doesn't matter. All of them will be cheering the team. All of them will be getting excited or getting depressed if the team loses. So there is a sense of unity. We are looking at we are expanding our identity. We are basically not getting limited to our individual problems, individual identity. We are forgetting all that, at least for a moment, and we are identifying with a bigger identity. We are Indians, and we are proud if India is doing well. So again, we have the same sense, same ego is coming, same emotion is coming, same thought process is coming, but we are expanding the horizon. So we are using our same faculties of emotion, ego, etc., that we used to use for our own individual interests. But right now we are focusing it on a higher cause. We are focusing on our country. And then we may forget our individual issues at that time. And if the country does well, we feel very, very elated. There is a euphoria for a few moments. Very, very strange kind of excitement for a few moments. So that is nationalism. So these things are lasting for a few moments, right? The country, we watched a 3-4 hour cricket match and the country won. We felt very excited during the match. Maybe we continue to feel excited after 1 hour also, maybe one day also. After that, it is gone. So some of these things stay for a few moments and then it is gone. So likewise, nationalism also, when something happens, some aggression against our country happens, nationalism gets spiked. And after that, again, it dissipates. So that is also, an emotion which basically gets elevated at some times and again gets, suppressed at some other times. So, but we are seeing at least that we have a capacity or tendency to identify or expand our boundaries, going from individual level all the way to bigger levels, national levels. And then there is this ultimate, which is basically again inherent to our own culture, the slogan of Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, the largest boundary that we can think of, at least in this world, in this earth, on this earth. That is saying that, identifying with the most common, the most, I would say, beneficial factors or the causes which concern the entire humanity. So again, there, we we are thinking about the welfare of the entire world. We are thinking about causes which are influencing all human beings, or at least important for all human beings. So we may be working in an organization which is producing goods and services for the entire world. And we may feel proud that, okay, I'm working with Intel, and Intel is producing so many semiconductor chips which are used by all the computers in the world. Likewise, I am working with Infosys. Infosys is producing software which is being used by the entire world. I mean, so many clients, so many companies are using the services provided by Infosys. Likewise, if I'm working with Tata Consultancy Service, I have a pride that, okay, I'm working with this organization which is serving so many people, so many companies, so many countries around the world. So I'm basically working with organizations, working with a group of people who are contributing to the overall good. They are basically working on a lot of good work which is influencing the world. Likewise, those who take up social problems, environmental problems, problems which are influencing humanity in a big way, they also have that agenda that, okay, let us save the environment, let us save wild animals, let us prevent cruelty towards animals, let us stop pollution, let us educate children more and more, let us generate more cultural values, educational values, let us educate people, let us make sure that we have sanitation and cleanliness all around. So these are higher goals. These are influencing the entire humanity. Let us have good relationships. Let us have good trade with other countries so that everybody can prosper. Let us eliminate poverty. Let us eliminate hunger. Let us eliminate malnutrition. So these are objectives which are plaguing humanity. And therefore, people who associate with this kind of objectives, even while working in some company, they may feel that, okay, I also want to work on some socially beneficial cause, and they may join an NGO and they may keep contributing towards that. And that, in fact, may become more interesting for them. So many people do that, and we see that there again, we are forgetting our own personal interest. We are getting a pleasure, we are getting a sense of internal satisfaction because we are contributing to a bigger cause. We feel some sense of satisfaction, some sense of accomplishment, some sense of pride that, okay, means at least I am doing something good for the world. So there are many ways. It's not necessary that you have to join an NGO while working in an organization, working in any kind of service also, you can contribute. And some people, as I said, that they dedicatedly work on some cause only. So the full-time working in an NGO, running an NGO, collecting funds and doing some good work. So they are also, their interest is not limited to their own cell, their own body, but they are working for a bigger cause. Whatever effort they can put, maybe they are doing cleaning in their colony only. Maybe they are organizing a small group of people who is cleaning the sea beach in the immediate neighborhood. But they are contributing to a social cause, a global cause. Maybe they are organizing some education for slum children, but they are dealing with an important cause. And that cause gives them the power, that gives them a motivation, that gives them unity, that it is not my own personal self-interest, but I am working for something which is for betterment of the world, for betterment of the society, of which I am part. So this tendency is always there, trying to serve the bigger, trying to become part of the bigger, trying to unify with the bigger. That gives us definitely a bigger and bigger feeling of satisfaction, happiness, and pleasure, peace, inner fulfillment, etc. So as you see, if we go towards, starting from our individual selfish purposes, if we go towards higher and higher purposes, as I showed in this sequence, definitely we'll see that as we go towards higher purposes, it gives more and more pleasure, more and more satisfaction, more and more bliss, more and more, a sense of accomplishment. So this feeling is always there within us. We have all experienced this kind of feeling. So let me, give some other examples. So now, so this is an example, where I have given example of a body. Now, in the body, different parts of the body, they are working, they are doing their own job ultimately. So everybody is, the ear is doing its own job of hearing, the mouth is doing its own work for speaking or eating, hands are doing their own work, legs is walking, everybody part is doing their own work. And to eating, when we have to basically energize the body, when we have to keep it alive, it has to be done through proper food. We need to have nutritious food. And that food needs to be put in the mouth, and that food has to go to the stomach. And the stomach is a central point as far as food is concerned. It digests the food. The nutrition is extracted and given to all body parts. So there, if the individual body parts start having conflict and individual ego, that why I should feed the hand, why I should feed the stomach, the hand will say that no, I should enjoy the food, I should keep basically smashing the food, I should keep pressing the food, my fingers should enjoy the food, or the mouth says that okay, I will keep the food in the mouth itself, I will just keep enjoying the taste, why I should feed the stomach, I should not send the food to the stomach. Likewise, the leg says I will not go towards the food, why should I walk, it is not my job, stomach is hungry, it is its job, let it go. So that doesn't work, because every part of the body has to contribute towards the well-being of the body, and they together have to feed the stomach. The leg has to walk towards the food, hand has to pick up the food, the nose has to make sure that the food is not foul smelling, it is not stale, it has to look good also, it should not be too degraded, it should be fresh and healthy, and so the eyes, nose, etc., they make sure that it is proper. Then the mouth basically takes in the food, the teeth are chewing, and then finally it goes to the stomach. So all of them are cooperating for their own sustenance. So in order for the whole body to live, all the body parts must cooperate and work to feed the stomach. So here also, if you look at the world, so if we are physically part of the bigger whole. We are not isolated individuals. We don't have isolated existence. So we are part of the bigger whole. Our bodies, which are made of matter, our mind, mental energy, the thoughts, ego, etc., they are also part of the bigger aggregate. So if you think of it this way, and that also, if you see the lower faculties, the body, mind, etc., that we acquire, they are also temporary. They keep going, coming, they keep changing. Every day our body and mind keeps changing, and definitely when death happens, it changes in a big way. So all these things that we are acquiring from outside, all the tools that we are acquiring from outside, whether it is subtle or gross, these tools keep changing every now and then. And if we just focus on gratifying these tools, gratifying the tongue, gratifying the mind, gratifying the eyes, so trying to gratify our own bodily senses all the time, then it is something like this, the hand saying that, okay, I will gratify myself, I will not feed the food to the stomach. So every body part is trying to gratify itself individually. So just as a crude analogy, trying to stress that we are part of the bigger whole, and rather than focusing on our own individual ego, our own individual emotional turbulence and thought level turbulences, if we try to see the fact as they are, means we are a small part of the creation. Our body, our personality is a small part of the creation, and we are a part of the bigger creation. If the creation is doing well, if the creation is supported, if we are contributing to the good of the creation or the good of the world, then we will also be supported. Our generations will also be supported. So that way we can see that there is a sense of detachment. So not just worrying about our own individual self, but serving the bigger whole, serving the source of existence, the source of life. So in this case, stomach is the source, because unless we feed the stomach, it is not going to be nourishing the body. The whole body will become weak. So likewise here, this concept of serving the whole, always keeping our consciousness higher, at a higher level, and trying to look at the whole world, trying to see our role in the world, whatever role we may have, whatever duties we may have, trying to contribute to our duties while keeping in mind that, okay, we are contributing our best to the world. World is giving so many things to us. It is giving us fresh air, fresh water. It is giving us healthy food. The farmers are growing food and eating it. It is reaching our table. So in all different ways, this nature, this world is feeding us. It is sustaining us. We have such a beautiful life. And then we are making hell of this life by focusing so much on our body parts and our mind and all the mental drama. So rather than doing that, if we think about the part of this bigger whole is sustaining us in so many ways. So let us not get trapped into the drama of this small body and mind. Let us serve the bigger whole by contributing our best. So that should be the attitude. So there we are having some higher goal. We are at least elevating ourselves from the individual focus limited focus, limited identity, and trying to serve the bigger goal. So that goal can also be linked to the creator. If there is a creation, there is a creator also. The creator also is benevolent. He also mentions in the Gita that Suhridam Sarvabhutanam Gyatva Mam Shantam Gacchati, that I am Suhridam to all the living beings. That means I am the well-wisher of all the living beings. And he also says, Aham Bija Pradapita. So I am the seed-giving father of the entire world. I am the life giver. I am the life force. I basically am the source of life for all the numerous living beings. So there is a creation and there is a creator. So then there is a concept of basically serving the creation and serving the creator. So there's this concept of devotion comes into picture. That okay, there is a supreme conscious force. It is not just a dead matter. It is not a passive nature. It is having an intelligent creator, and he is benevolent. He definitely wishes that everything in the world remains in order. Every individual works according to the right dharma. Every individual fulfills his duty and acquires the right kind of sources, lives happily, lives peacefully, lives joyfully. So let us contribute towards that objective of well-being of every individual, upkeep of the world, maintenance of the world, maintenance of the dharma, maintenance of the right process. So that is basically taking us towards the devotion. That okay, devotion towards the whole nature, devotion towards the creator, devotion towards the world of which we are part. Without this nature, we are nothing. We are not even being, we will not be able to even survive. That is the concept we need to look at if we want to understand the practical application, the practical aspects of the devotion. So then there is another example on this slide, if you can see. Here, if you look at the lower picture, here I have shown that there are a lot of ripples in the water. There is a pond maybe, and the top surface is shown, top view of the surface of a pond. And maybe because of a raindrop, there is a lot of ripples all around, and all these ripples are colliding. So likewise, what will happen if you have, say, if you have a sitting beside the pond and you throw stones in the pond, so if you throw stones at multiple locations, so all these multiple locations will create their own ripples and they will collide, and ultimately there will be no sustained ripple. They all collide and it will become all the ripples will collide and get destroyed. So whereas if all the stones are being thrown at a single point, that I have shown in the first slide, all the stones being thrown at a single point, then all these ripples are sustained. They are basically a single source and expanding peacefully without collision, without interference. They are expanding. So as long as we keep putting the energy at that point, keep putting the stone at that point, it will keep expanding. So likewise, in this world, if the individuals are so much concentrated on their own personal interests, their own ego, their own mental problems, their own emotions, their own jungle of thoughts, their own self-interest, their own tendency to just gratify their body and mind and ego, all kinds of things. Not understanding that we are small speck in the nature, and we are giving too much importance to this small speck of mind and body that we temporarily hold. Our position is much superior to this small speck of body and mind. We are Atma, we are self. We are much more joyful and blissful. We are eternal. We are not temporary like this nature. So without understanding that, if we stay entangled in that lower nature and always keep focusing on our own personal interest, own personal gratification of body and mind, then everybody has that own, interest. Everybody is trying to create their own circle. Everybody is trying to create their own ripple. And all these ripples are going to collide eventually. So everybody has their own self-interest. Everybody is having their own agenda of gratifying themselves. And therefore, these create, non-concentric circles. And all these circles, all these ripples collide, and there is so much turbulence. And we get entangled in the turbulence. The turbulence basically disturbs us. So this is an example, like an analogy that, okay, if we are focusing on a bigger good, means not so much getting perturbed by ups and downs that we have to face, not getting so much pulled towards our own gratification, and focusing on a bigger cause, bigger objectives, then we have much more stability, much more peace, much more inner joy. And if we work in that way, then most of the negative things that happen in the mind, that will also be gone. And that bigger joy, that bigger objective may be basically, looking at the bigger picture, looking at the life itself, looking at our contribution to the world, and remembering this fact that this world is sustaining us. Let us contribute our bit to sustain the world. That is the process. And then when we're talking about the creation, again, the creator comes into the picture. So in a way, it is a service to the creator also. That, okay, the creator has given all these things, all these nice food items, fruits, vegetables, air, water, river, oceans, mountains. All these things are feeding us. All these things are nourishing us. So many trees, so many birds, so many wonderful things all around us. So this nature is feeding us. It is sustaining us. Let us contribute our bit to sustain the nature. So that is the process, and that is basically the principle of devotion. Let us, express our gratitude. Let us express our gratitude towards the creation. Let us express our gratitude towards the creator. That is bhakti yoga. That is basically the concept of devotion. So here, we have seen so many basically misutilization of this word bhakti, right? So these days, this word has been politicized. So we have a bhakta, right? So there are, in the political scenario, you are a bhakt, then you are a basically brainwashed individual. So I'm just trying to take this example that, okay, how do people become bhakt, and why they cheer a political leader? Why do they identify with that political leader? So just like, when we are talking about the Supreme Person and we are trying to have some gratitude and trying to have some devotion, trying to have some attachment towards that Supreme Person, trying to basically serve that Supreme Person, focusing our interest on serving that Supreme Person who is source of the creation. So mentally, how do we do that? So again, we have experience of this in our day-to-day world also. So people are getting devoted to somebody who is trying to do good work, right? For example, if there's a political leader who has a good following, so people are seeing that, okay, he has some agenda which is good for everyone. He's trying to do some development for the country. He's trying to, benefit poor. He's trying to give electricity. He's trying to give gas cylinders. He's trying to give some money to the poor. He's trying to amend some policies. He's trying to unite the nation. He's trying to defeat the enemies. So there are certain good things for everybody is good that he's doing. He's taking right decisions. He's empowering people through technology. He's empowering people through finance. So at least there are some policies, some agenda, some manifesto, and people have devotion towards that person because he's leading that manifesto. So now, so all of us have experience. Okay, if there is something or a leader who is basically doing or basically proposing to do some good work and people have trust in that, so people get some devotion. They get some emotional attachment also. So they forget about their own personal differences and they vote for that leader. They get devoted to the leader. They basically they will not like to listen anything bad about that leader. So there is a sense of devotion that is getting developed. So we are I'm not taking sides of BJP or Congress. I'm just saying that is an example that in our day-to-day life also we see this. So therefore, here we have the creator or the creation, which is source of life for every individual. It is not biased. It is not partisan. It is not playing in politics. It is not working for any benefit. It is not even asking us to worship it. It is not even asking us to give vote to it. It is not even asking any money in return. It is just fulfilling the requirements of numerous lives all around the world. It is sustaining the life. It is sustaining us. And therefore, as a gratitude, definitely we should try to focus our energies, focus our thought process on the overall good. Then let us serve the creation. Let us serve the creator. That is again the principle of devotion that I am talking about. So again, when we talk about devotion, some people may say that, okay, this is just some emotional stuff. People who are too emotional, they are only, having devotion. So people who are not emotional, for them, devotion doesn't work. For them, Jnana Yoga is the highest thing. As long as you have the Jnana, as long as you have the Jnana Yoga, you are able to meditate and come to the level of the self, come to the level of the Atma, you are okay. But again, the Upanishad says that, okay, coming to the level of self and becoming the controller of body and mind is not enough. Means if you want to have permanence, if you want to have stability, you must try to hinge to the link to the basically bigger force, the force which is eternal, the source which is, the source of all joy, all bliss, all eternity. The creation itself is basically coming from that source. So you need to link with that source. So unless we do that, there is always a chance we'll get entangled again into a lower nature. So if we have, we always have a tendency to get attached. So rather than getting attached to the lower nature, let us get attached to the higher nature. Let us focus our energy, let us focus our thought process, let us focus our desire, let us focus our emotions on the higher aspect, on the creator. So that way we will be always elevated from the lower self. We will not get entangled in the lower self. And once we are attached to that higher self, when we are devoted to that supreme self, knowing him, understanding him as the most benevolent source of energy, most benevolent source of life, the sustainer of life on this earth, on this world, then we will see our every act, our every work as a devotion towards that particular source. That is the concept of devotion. So it definitely Gyan helps, the knowledge helps. So knowledge of the nature, that okay, what is the nature, the three gunas of the nature, the the binding forces in the nature, the time factor, how the karma chakra works, the time factor works. All these things are understandable, and we understand that how temporary are things over here, how changing the things are over here, and then understanding that if we try to attach ourselves to the lower nature, we are also going to get trapped with all these attachments and all kinds of agitations, all kinds of suffering. We have to face this cycle of birth and death and this karma chakra. So this knowledge is there. Then we also understand that, okay, how if we elevate ourselves from this lower level, it benefits us, it gives us more peace and equanimity, it gives us more balanced life. And then, understanding that, okay, what is the power of the Supreme Person who is sustaining this world, who is the creator, and if we focus on that, then, we can basically develop, we can understand the greatness of that power, we can understand the greatness of that life. It is not just a dull, lifeless energy. It is an intelligent power. It is a supreme conscious power. If we have our individual consciousness, the creator is a supreme conscious being. So maybe we don't understand that power. We don't have much understanding about that power. But, there is a process given that this is how you can understand. And the only process you can understand that supreme power is devotion. So having gratitude, having devotion towards that supreme power, that is the only way to understand. Because then only there can be grace from his side and we can understand. So this is the whole ladder of devotion that I have tried to depict. And then in Gita, there are n number of shlokas. I will not be able to cover every shlok, but tomorrow I will try to pick up some shlokas where, the main devotional principles are given. As I said, there are numerous shlokas. Every chapter is filled of that. And there are some chapters which are just having devotional shlokas only. So I will try to capture some of the important ones in tomorrow's session and then try to close this. So I hope I could explain the matter in a crude way at least. And again, I said that this is a very esoteric topic and not a very, maybe it takes some time to appreciate it. If somebody has not thought in this direction, somebody has not practiced thinking in this way, not seen the world in this way, not basically tried to think beyond our own self, then it will be difficult to grasp. But by practice, by understanding these things and understanding what is the benefit, ultimately, if there is no benefit, nobody will do it. If we understand that, yes, there is some benefit, then only we will do it. So if we understand, if we realize, if we feel that, yes, there is a benefit of doing this kind of process and elevating our mental process from our individual self towards the universal self, then we will be motivated towards doing it. So with this, I would like to close my discussion and be happy to answer if there is any question.
I would just like to thank you so much. I always wanted to know about Gita, and you are the one who, I could at least initiate the whole process and to know about the Gita, and you explained everything so nicely. Of course, I'm going to read it in more, because I think Gita verses are like you cannot learn or you cannot know in few days, but you have really explained it very nicely, and I think it is going to change my thought process and my change of life and how I'm going to see things and my actions, my deeds. I'm really thankful to you. Thank you so much.
Thank you for kind words. So any other question? So tomorrow, as I said, we will be covering our verses on this also, and that will give us probably more insight. Right now, I have just given the background, that this is the principle. Any other question, or anybody would like to have any comment?
I have one question on this Bhakti Yoga, that is a sloka 5, there is a Abhyakta form of God, that is the right and it says that this Abhyakta, if I pray this Abhyakta form of God, then we will invite only the sorrow. So what is this Abhyakta form actually? I don't understand this.
So your question is that if we focus on the abstract
It
form
is.
of God, then there is
Now, what is this
then it
Abhyakta
brings us
form?
thought.
If you see the 5, the sloka 5 of Bhakti Yoga,
Yeah.
so it says there is a form of Abhyakta form of God, and if we pray this form, then we will only invite sorrow.
It is not sorrow. So that is the matter of 12th chapter. And 12th chapter is the discussion on the abstract form. That whether we should focus on manifest divine person. That okay, means worshipping him as our divine, basically our deity. Like somebody may worship Vishnu, right? So Gita is basically being spoken by Krishna as Vishnu or Narayan, which in our Vedic system is considered the supreme power. Narayan is considered the supreme power. So Krishna is assuming he is taking the role of the Narayan and he is speaking as a Narayan. So there, the question is that okay, whether we should worship a person, God as a person, God as Narayan, as a Sakar Sarup, that means a God with form, or we should worship him as a infinite, formless being. So sometimes this infinite, formless being is considered to be, so there are two philosophies. One says that the ultimate, the highest form of the divine is infinite and formless. It has no limited form. It cannot take human form. If it takes human form, it is an avatar, and that is also a temporary form. And then ultimately, the ultimate form, the supreme form, is formless. It is having all the good qualities. It is having all the creative power. It is having all the omnipresence and omniscience, and it is all powerful. All those divine qualities remain, but only thing is, he's not having a form. He's not limited to a form. So this is the concept of Nirakar or Nirgun. So there is a conception that okay means the other concept says that no, means the higher aspect is having a akar, means there is a sakar form or sagun form which is higher, and that basically is the source of the nirgun form. So the nirgun Brahman or the nirgun, the divine personality, the nirgun power of the God, the formless aspect of the God, the formless aspect of the Creator, which is pervading everywhere. It comes from the personal, or I'd say a person, individual person or a supreme person. So there, it is just like relatable. You can have a relationship with that person, and you can basically get devoted to that person. So what is actually said in Gita is that if you devote yourself to that impersonal means that the person with the supreme, without characteristics, without basically akar, without any manifest form. So if you devote yourself to that, it is difficult for an individual to have devotion towards that. It is more difficult. Whereas having devotion towards Sakar Brahman or Sakar Ishwar, that is easier. And that is what is recommended in Gita. So Arjuna asked this question. We'll see that tomorrow. It is again a very broad topic. So Arjuna asked this question whether I should go for the Nirakar or I should go for the Sakar. Whether I should worship the manifest, I should have devotion towards the unmanifest, or I should have devotion towards the manifest form. So then Krishna says that don't go for the unmanifest form because that is very, very difficult. Those who meditate upon me, he says that those who meditate upon me as the supreme person, that means the Sakar Brahma, they are superior. So that is a conclusion given. I mean, that is practical also if you see. That is what it is mentioned. It's not that it leads to distress. What is mentioned is that it is more difficult. It is a difficult path. And it may not give you that much satisfaction. It may not give you that much quick progress. Whereas the Sagun path is easier to follow. It is easier to progress. So we'll discuss that. There's
Thank you.
again a
Thank you
theology
very
part and there's lot of discussion. Yes, any other question? So what we are trying to say here is that okay, all the other yogas and all the other concepts that we have seen, Buddhi Yoga and Karma Yoga and Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga. So if we have the highest objective in our mind, if we are devoting ourselves to the Supreme Being, then all the motivation behind all these yoga, etc., all the other principles of yoga, all the other practices of yoga, that will also be strengthened. That resolve will also be strengthened. Right? So that is the main thing. So that is why it is called the central point. If you have devotion toward the Supreme, then all other yoga practices, because each practice is important, right? You need to have Gyan, you need to do meditation, you need to have some Dhyan Yoga, you need to do the daily activities, you need to earn your wages, you need to sustain your body, you need to do Karma Yoga. So Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Dhyana Yoga, all those things are there. But ultimately, if we have bhakti in the center, then all these processes also become streamlined, and we joyfully we are able to execute others also. So, for example, a mother who is having a lot of affection, lot of devotion, that is also a form of devotion, right? So, towards the child, every species has this, not just human beings, every species. So, she will forget everything else, means all the other distress, all the other problems, all the other issues, and she's so much focused, so much devoted towards that child. So likewise here, this is the example. Okay, if you basically focus your energy on something superior, means you focus your thought and gratitude and emotions, devotion, all the things on a higher power, which is eternal, which is always present, which is always with us, and that is the only power with which we are always associated. All other things will change. All other people around us will change. They will come and go. But that is a supreme power which is always present with us in all life. It is always present within us as Paramatma also. So that is a supreme power with which we should always associate, always meditate, and always have all our emotion, devotion, energies, our gratitude, our thankfulness, our duties, all dedicated towards Him, that supreme power. So in every puja also, wherever there is puja organized, there the last, towards the end of the puja, the mantra that is chanted is Narayanayati Samarpayami. Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva Buddhyatmanava Prakatei Sabhavat Karomi Yadyat Sakal Parasmai Narayanayati Samarpayami. So this mantra says Kayena Vacha, means whatever I do with my body or speech, Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva, by my mind or my organs, whatever actions I perform by my body, by my mind, by my actions, by my speech, Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva Buddhyatmanava Prakritei Sabhava. Buddhya is by intelligence. So all these faculties, right? Mind, body, intelligence, then organs. So whatever activities I perform by all these faculties, Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva Buddhyatmanava Prakritei Sabhava. Prakritei Sabhava means by the nature that I have acquired from Prakriti. Prakriti, Subhav means our own Subhav. So Prakritei Sabhava means by the nature I have acquired some Subhav from my birth, from my prior karma, whatever. I have acquired some nature, I have acquired some Subhav. According to that, I have been given some role, I have acquired some responsibility in this world. So whatever I do in that position, through my body, through my mind, through my speech, through my thoughts, through my intelligence, Kayena Vacha Manasendriyeva Buddhyatmanava Prakritei Sabhavat Karomi Yadyat Sakal Parasmai. Karomi Yadyat means whatever I do from all these things. Sakal Parasmai. Sakal Parasmai means par asmi. Whatever I do to myself or whatever I do to others. Sakal Parasmai. Narayanayati Samarpayam. So let me offer that to the Narayan. That is the last mantra. So that is done, that even whatever puja, etc. we perform, yajna, puja, we call Pandit and do some puja. So there also the concept of Karma Yoga is that you don't do the puja for getting some result. And I do this puja, I get this result, or I get some benefit out of that. No. Once you chant this mantra at the end, the results are dedicated to the Supreme Person, Narayan. And all the results are dedicated to Him. That I am not doing anything for my own self-interest. I am dedicating all the good things to you. So that is the principle of Bhakti Yoga, which is very core to our rituals also. So, any other question?
One thing that in our Hindu religion, we have other big gods like Shiva and Brahma. So, but according to Gita, is supreme is Narayana. Is it the actually implication of Gita, or what is your opinion?
So again, I mean, that is again a debatable thing, because over the generation, a lot of things have happened, a lot of things have changed, a lot of so there are according to one's nature, like there are certain people who may be more inclined towards the feminine nature and worshipping the mother goddess. Some people may have more inclination towards the male form, or worshipping him as a supreme person or the father figure or whatever. So again, in Hinduism, we have all the freedom. Depending upon our nature, we may be able to worship other forms also. But again, this is a very detailed topic, and it is not something that I can explain in 5 minutes. But there is this concept that the highest form, we have looked at the forms, right? Sattva guna, Tamo guna, Rajo guna. So Vishnu is called the Adhisthata, or the basically he is the proprietor of the sattvic form, Sattva guna. So Vishnu is at the Sattva stage. So he is basically regarded as the higher form, basically closest. Basically, he is the I would say the Brahman closest, I would say, form, or closely related to Brahman, or he is the source of Brahman. So again, these are just manifestations. Shiva is also manifestation of the Supreme only. So he is only a Gunavatar. So this is the concept of Gunavatar. Gunavatar means the Supreme, when it gets associated with one quality, it takes a incarnation in that quality. So Supreme is beyond this nature. So this three guna, basically the Rajoguna, Tamoguna, Sattva, he is beyond this. He is the creator of these gunas. So when he takes association of the Sattva guna, he becomes Vishnu. He takes association of the Tamoguna, he becomes Shiva. Rajoguna, he becomes Brahma. So that is the concept. So again, he doesn't get influenced by these gunas. He is controlling these gunas. He is the master of these gunas in all these forms. But the Narayan form is assumed to be the superior, means it is beyond the guna. So it is beyond the three guna. So Narayan comes as Vishnu in the Sattva guna. He comes as Shiva in Tamoguna. He comes as Brahma in Rajoguna. So basically, there is a Narayan Sukta. Narayan Sukta in the Atharva Veda, if we recite it. Not Narayan Sukta. Narayan Sukta is also there. Narayan Upanishad is also there. So Narayan Upanishad, if you see, the shlokas are like this. Brahma Narayanaha, Shivasta Narayanaha, Sakrasta Narayanaha, Dava Prativyauta Narayanaha. It means he is saying that Brahma is also Narayan. Shiva is also Narayan. It also says, first it says, Narayana Brahma Jayate, Narayana Rudra Jayate, Narayana Indra Jayate, Narayana Prajapataya Prajayante. It gives a list that, okay, Narayan is the source of origin. From him only all these other divinities are coming. He is taking the form of these divinities. And then it says, next, Brahma Narayanaha, Shivascha Narayanaha, Shakrascha Narayana. Means don't get confused. Brahma is also Narayan. Brahma is not separate. He is coming from Narayan. So Brahma Narayanaha, Shivascha Narayanaha. Shiva is also Narayan. So he is also an aspect of Narayan. So that's why we have lots of flexibility. We feel devoted towards one aspect, okay, we can get devotion towards that. But there is recommendation that, okay, you always keep Narayan in mind. There is a supreme person. Whatever be that supreme person, if you are imagining some aspect of that, okay, means if you are getting attached to some aspect of that, some guna or some form of that, okay, you can have devotion towards that, but always assume, always understand that you are worshipping the supreme. You are not worshipping a particular form or a particular aspect to get certain desires fulfilled. That I am worshipping Saraswati to get knowledge, or I am worshipping Lakshmi to get Vidya, wealth, or I am worshipping Durga to get Shakti. I am worshipping Shiva to get some good things. So if you have these desires, then it is always degraded. It is not devotion. So once it is selfless, once it is having higher objectives, once it is just as a service, then even if you devote that kind of devotion towards any other form, it will ultimately go towards the Supreme Narayan. That is the concept.
Then this Gayatri we recite, that is for this Narayana, supreme power? Or?
Yeah, so that is from, whatever I recited just now, it is from Narayan Upanishad, which is in Atharva Veda.
Okay,
I'll
thank
give
you.
you a copy, I'll send you. So Veda also, if you see, there is clear indication that, okay, means, so let us discuss this tomorrow, because this is a very detailed topic, and it will be difficult to explain everything today. Any other question related to what we discussed today? Any other question related to what we discussed today? Okay, so I think we discussed some of the responses were not linked to today's discussion, but we went ahead with that. So in case there is no question for today's discussion, let us close the session. Let us meet tomorrow. We'll just try to cover some very motivating verses from tomorrow's discussion from the Gita to close our discussion on devotion and how it can help us in executing other yoga. So thank you very much. Let us meet tomorrow.